My humble prostrations at the lotus feet of our most beloved Amma, Sadguru Srimata Amritanandamayi Devi, world-renowned humanitarian leader and Divine Mother and Guru to millions of our devotees and followers, and all the more the Chancellor of the Amrita Vishwavidyapeetham, which is ranked as the fourth best university in the country by the National Institutional Ranking Framework of the Ministry of Higher Education, Ministry of HRD. And my humble pranams to Dr. Kanchan K. Malik, our guest of honor and speaker today. Namaskar. Today, there are two sessions starting in about 10 minutes. Parallelly, another one in the area of commerce and management, and this one in the area of media education. And today, this session is the 8th session in the whole series of the 3-day deliberations on the media education in the context of totally the education in the context of National Education Policy 2020 implementation. So I take this opportunity and feel happy about introducing our guest of honor, Dr. Kanchan K. Malik. She is a professor and former head at the Department of Communication at the Central University of Hyderabad. She is a faculty fellow with UNESCO Chair on Community Media since 2011 and editor of the newsletter CR News. She got a PhD in communication from the University of Hyderabad, and she has a dual master's in economics and mass communication. She worked as a journalist with the Economic Times and as faculty in two reputed state universities before joining the University of Hyderabad. Her teaching and research have been focused in the area of community media, women in community communications, journalism studies, and media ethics. She is co-author of Other Voices, The Struggle for Community Radio in India, the Sage 2007. Her recent book on community radio in South Asia, Reclaiming the Airwaves, it's a publication of the Routledge in 2020, is co-edited with Shri Vinod Pavarala, and we are all happy and privileged to offer our heartfelt, hearty welcome to Dr. Kanchan K. Malik on behalf of the Amrita Vishwavidyapeetham University and on behalf of the Faculty of Media, Arts and Commerce, and on behalf of the organizing departments of Visual Media and Communication at Kochi, Visual Media, Visual Communication at Mysore, and the Department of Communications at our university headquarters. So on behalf of all the participants, by offering humble pranams once again to you and once again to all the participants, let me offer to you, ma'am, a most hearty welcome. And Dr. Kanchan Malik will be mainly focusing on her deliberations of the paradigms in the new paradigms in the media education in the context of the NEP 2020. I wish all the best to all the participants and hearty welcome once again to Dr. Kanchan K. Malik. Namaskar, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dr. U. Krishna Kumarji, for your warm welcome. For this invitation to talk here as part of your faculty development program. It is an honor, a privilege, and I'm very grateful. I'm grateful for Dr. Dinesh Babu to have been following my work, which is more on the sidelines on the communication and media education. Although, as you have said, my core work is on community media, but I admire the fact that he has been following it. And we all, as media educators, tend to engage with the paradigms in communication and media education, especially in the changing times today. I'll try to dwell on that. But before that, may I please share my PPT? All right. So let me begin by saying that we are all very aware of the demands that the changing mediascape has been making on communication and media education. We are all very aware of that, of the digital revolution that is happening, and we are looking at new ways of, let us say, delivering the course curriculum or the skills, as well as to our media students as media educators, and preparing them for a world which has a whole lot of new challenges. I feel that at this time when digital revolution is happening, how we still stick to some of the core tenets that are associated with media education is what is the important thing, and that is where that is going to be the flow of my presentation today. And I consider the new education policy 2020 is a great means to keep us on track. um, if we do a deep reading of the new education policy 2020 and simultaneously combine, the keywords with media education, use some of the words from the national education policy and others from media education, and try to generate a cloud, the crucial concepts that have come out from me are holistic and multidisciplinary education. Please try this out sometime, to take one core a part of the national education policy and some of the things that you relate with communication education, and you will see that it kind of gives us a guideline on what we need to focus on when we are thinking of the new ways of doing what we are doing as media educators. So some of the crucial concepts that capture the essence would be holistic and multidisciplinary education, digital learning, of course, and teaching. We need to adapt to the times. Credible evaluation systems, then cutting edge pedagogy. Pedagogy is a focus, is the main focus that we need to keep at this point of time. It is not so much about, you know, what to teach, but how to teach. And then, of course, a teaching and learning that is directed towards cognitive development. And of course, the whole national education policy is about, it is talking about inclusivity and inclusive culture in several of its provisions. So, if I were to tell all the participants today, since I am, we are separated by this wall of technology, so I can't make it so participatory, but I wish I could have. And I could have asked all of you to, just come up with, in your mind for now, the objectives that you hold in your head about media education. What do you think? If I were to ask you to come up with one, uh, you know, uh, sorry, there's a lot of sound in the background. Somebody's mic is on. Yeah, it's got. So, so if we look at the objectives of media education today, if you were to come up with, one objective each, or all of us have the objectives of media education in mind. Uh, they are not, they are quite similar to what was being pursued even before. So the main idea is, and digital revolution may not have changed so much of the objectives. It is essentially to educate in the realm of communication, to make our students to be capable of adapting to the media world, right? So we need, what is needed in the new times is to update the methods and models. So it's more about updating with the new demands, rather than changing the complete objective of media education, which is to prepare our students for the media that exists in the present times. So media education today has to offer responses to the new needs of the changing media technologies. That is a given. So if media technology changes, we move from print focus to audiovisual, and then to new media. That all has happened, and now we are into this fast moving digital revolution. So we need to respond to the technological changes that are happening, no doubt about that. But media education must factor in the technical innovations that have revolutionized media and redefined. But we need to redefine the paradigms in a manner that when we adapt to this digital age, we are not leaving behind, again, as I had said earlier, some of those core objectives of media education that you just thought, when I asked you to think about them, that you just thought are the basis of any media or communication education. You will all agree with me that we are in a historically amazing moment for education. So education as a whole, with the digital revolution happening, has is witnessing a very important and amazing moment, and we all as media educators are a part of that. Digital revolution has modified our lifestyles, habits as teachers also, as well as our understanding of the world. We have so much more at our disposal to learn from. Traditionally, one of the basic objectives of education was linguistic and cognitive literacy. Just as earlier, the focus of education as a whole, and not just media education, was on linguistic and cognitive literacy, and acquisition of skills was more about reading and writing. Today, in the digital revolution era, literacy in the new multimedia and hypermedia are necessary capabilities for using these tools. So, education as a whole has started using media. We are talking about media education, but the education as a whole has started depending upon this new media technology. The things that so it's very challenging at this time, to not just be giving media education in a manner which is meant for media students, but also to be able to use media education to implement the goals of the Indian national education policy. Indian national education policy has lofty ideals, and they are very challenging. And anything that challenges you tends to bring about changes in you. As you would agree with me, and I'm sure by now a lot of other resource persons have emphasized on that the affirmed orientation of the National Education Policy 2020 is towards path-breaking reforms that would transform India into an equitable and vibrant knowledge society. It will make our education system robust and healthy. Uh, an education system that can not only withstand the onslaught of the pandemic, but ensure prosperity and self-reliance for all. But the devil, as they say, is in the detail. The detail of taking this National Education Policy 2020 forward, and the right steps to ensure that goals are matched by implementation. So the reality check of National Education Policy 2020 is in its successful execution. And I feel for the successful execution of the national education policy, and I will come to how national education, what it means for media education, but I feel that for the implementation itself of the national education policy, media education has to become a core competency. So it doesn't have to be taught only as, a specialized course in its own right, which it has to, but in some way or the other, it has to be introduced in all the other curricula also that are being taught. So the changing paradigm of media education must be such that it meets the challenges of implementing the lofty ideals of NEP and serves as a means for facilitating the reconfiguration of India's education system as envisioned by the ambitious provisions of the National Education Policy 2020. And for that, integration of media education pedagogy literacy, so you can call it by any other name, literacy, media pedagogy, it is essential throughout the life cycle of a student's education. This is what will equip citizens for adequate use and consumption of the techno media products that we are dealing with today. So, yes, a paradigm change is needed within the media education curriculum. But when we look at the curricula as a whole, when we look at education as a whole, media education, media literacy, and pedagogy must become a part of it. And this is what will build the capacity of our students and of people who are at the at who are receiving media literacy to analyze, use, and even express in different ways the messages produced by them, and to do it responsibly. So this is the first point that I wanted to deal with before getting into our core, before getting into the core course or the core subject discipline that we belong to, right? So the education of the new generations, what is needed is not only their integration into the society, but uh, they should be able to use media for the betterment of the society. This is the basis on which I will be introducing the new paradigm, saying that yes, technology is important, technological skills are important, but for any change to come about in our educational and pedagogical strategies, the media must be linked to the betterment of society. So the idea is not only to widen and optimize the instrumental abilities of the students, but also that they can be critical of everything that impedes the global development of society or which generates injustices and inequalities. This is going to be the basis on which I would be introducing some of the ideas that I have in my mind when we take a real look at our, media curriculum. For the epistemological structure of media pedagogy or education, so which basically means, the basis on which you would like to restructure your approach to media pedagogy or education. And this applies to the media education that is part of education as a whole. And now, more specifically, I'm talking about our own core course, which is media studies or communication or mass communication, journalism. There are different names we give to it, but some of these core principles remain at the heart of the teaching of all that we are doing. So I will be talking mainly about four things here. One, we must make media education holistic and multidisciplinary. As you see, it borrows directly from the new education policy. Then we must create the education 4.0 learning environment. This is our response to the digital age, to the new technology that is coming in. We cannot ignore it, right? But adapting and adopting it needs to be done with social consciousness in mind, right? So yes, technology efficient, technology savvy, aware of what is going around us is important, but education needs to adopt itself to the present times and the present demands of the students. Then, of course, what is very important is to enable inclusion, for which multilingualism is very important. And certainly, there's a need for a culture of research. And fourth is something which is close to my heart. I feel no education is complete, and certainly not communication education, if we do not relate it to this skill. I consider it a very important skill, the skill of ethical decision making, which I think should be a part of a media ethics curriculum, which has to be an indispensable part of any media education. Let me come to the first part. So I come from, which is on making media education holistic and multidisciplinary. So I come from a background, I work in the area of communication for development. I come from a background of what is called participatory communication. And participatory communication looks at education as a social process. And the idea behind participatory communication, which must be applied to any media education that is happening now in the present, in the present situation, and in the light of the new National Education Policy 2020, it must focus on democratizing knowledge and adopting multiple interpretations of literacy. There's not just one way of educating people. There are multiple ways in which literacy manifests itself, and we have to give importance to all of that, depending upon the capability and the requirement of the students, and the demands from the public. You have to customize your way of imparting education accordingly. I hope I'm clear. My voice is coming clear. Hello.
Yes, ma'am, it's clear.
Okay. So as I was saying, the first paradigm, so to say, or the first step that needs to be taken is, hello. Yeah, there's some disturbance here. Okay. Hello. Yeah. The most important paradigm that we need to follow is to democratize knowledge and adopt multiple interpretations of literacy. So we must realize, and this is the right time to do it. We should have done it long back, and it is not that it was not thought of earlier, but this is a crucial time, when we should be accepting the fact that education is not just about pouring knowledge into the heads of the students or transferring the skill sets so that they become industry ready or equipped. I'm not trying to say that media education or media courses or media curriculum does not have to make them industry equipped. That is one of the objectives to do it. But we don't have to stop there, is the point I'm trying to make. We have to redefine the current pedagogical practices so that teaching is made more engaging, it is made more contextual, holistic, participatory, and democratic. Those are big words, but every single word means that is a means of making our education effective. So we have to move away from the binaries of thinkers or philosophers or theorists think, and these are the practitioners, these are the people who will go and do the job, doers do. This binary is something we have to move away from. Why can we not have capable practitioners who are also critical thinkers? Why can't we have thinking practitioners? That is that is what media education should now be aiming at. So I am going to quote here Paulo Freire, who's arguably one of the most renowned philosophers in the area of critical pedagogy. So in his book Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Paulo Freire questioned the prevailing practices of education that reduce students to the status of passive objects to be acted upon by the teacher. Teacher has to dump knowledge into the head of the student. This is an outdated form of education. And in this outdated form, the responsibility of the teacher was to simply fill the minds of the students with bits of information. And now, of course, if you turn it to the digital revolution, it will be bytes of information, which constitute knowledge. This was called by Paulo Freire as the banking model of education. And what was the objective of the banking education? It was to condition people into accepting existing frameworks of power and and historical as well as hierarchical agency. That you have to go down to power. You have to accept things as they are and turn, adapt yourself to what is being offered to you. Freire disapproves, I mean, and if you don't do that, if you don't fit into the mold, you are a failure. So that is not the kind of education one is looking at. Freire disapproves the approach where the teachers envisage themselves as the singular possessors of knowledge. They are possessors of knowledge, no doubt, but they are not the only ones. And, they are not the only ones who can make you wise. While students are, that means only taken as being, unwise, not knowing anything, until teachers pour knowledge into their head, they are going to remain stupid. That is not the approach that the present education has to have. In contrast, good teaching consists of creating the conditions for genuine dialogue. So, interactive classrooms is what one is looking at. So, instead of the banking method, Freire proposes a give and take, reciprocal relationship between the teacher and the student in an environment that is democratic and allows everyone to gain knowledge and learn from each other. We call it in education the that there has to be co-learning, uh, and teacher also has to be a student all of his or her life, right? Uh, Whereas students are not to be considered as completely dumb who have to be given knowledge, but as thinking people with whom you can interact and enrich the class, or the subject that you are talking about. So the relationship, which is developed through banking method, that we talked about, between the teacher and the student is characterized by insecurity, suspicion, and the fear of one another. So you have to listen to your teacher. If you don't do the assignment, you will get punished. And you have to always bow down when the teacher is talking to you. Uh, it's kind of a very oppressive control, as far as students are concerned. They cannot relax and talk to the students about the new ideas that they have, about a different way of thinking that they might have in their head, or the 101 questions that they might have in their head. So that rapport has to be created, which is part of what Freire proposes as the critical pedagogy, where the relationship is egalitarian in so far as both the teacher and the students are prepared to and willing to the option of learning from each other. I'm sure a teacher gains a lot from interacting with students and listening to them also, uh, you know and from the questions that they ask. Every time we present and we get feedback, and there are questions related to the presentation that one has given, you are able to think about it in so many different ways. So why not in a class? So in such a type of relationship, no one is superior to anyone, and there is mutual regard, and the student does not feel scared of the teacher. Making a student do assignments should not come out of a fear, for fear of the teacher. It should come out of the will to learn. So thus there is a need for education to become a communion of sorts between participants through a dialogue characterized by reflexive, reciprocal, and socially relevant exchange. So, if you link your teaching, hello,
Yes, ma'am, we
hello,
can hear you.
okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was. Yes. So, yeah, I was saying that, there has to be a reciprocal kind of relationship and a reflexive way of doing, of educating students, which connects it to their lived experiences, the real life that they are leading to, so that they can connect with it and benefit from it. So teachers have to take on, the role as facilitators. The new paradigm of education must create a pedagogical space that is not only student centric but student produced. So the teachers facilitate the students to get engaged and involved with the what they are learning, right? And when they take on the role of being facilitators, they enable students to critically question and analyze situations in a very nuanced way, not just one size fits all kind of way of thinking and interpreting things. So teachers must make students participate in the learning process, feel confident about thinking on is provide students with balanced inputs in both theory and practice. So it shouldn't be just about practice or just about theory, to develop professional practitioners who are able to appropriate their skills to diverse socio cultural contexts, right? So they're able to adapt their skills to the need of the hour. And at one point they might be, they might go along with the market forces and the state policy. On another point, at another point, what takes primacy is the social good, right? So sometimes you can combine market forces, state policy, and social good also. So that adaptability has to come with the curriculum. And of course, the important thing in the national education policy 2020 is the multidisciplinary approach. So media education, guided by the National Education Policy 2020, it must change to repurpose or reimagine the existing pedagogical practices.
Teachers as facilitators. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
ma'am.
we need facilitators at all points in everything we do. And teachers have to become facilitators also. So I was talking about, other than being, in addition to being facilitators, the approach that we need to have, towards our curriculum is one that is multidisciplinary. So media education, guided by the new education policy, has to repurpose and reimagine, of course, the existing pedagogical practices. And the idea is to allow craft is the skilled part, creativity, and critical thinking to cohabitate. So all of these must be, it's not one and the other, it's a combination of all of them. So not, again, as far as students are concerned, when we feel threatened when we are not able to ask questions, give answers to all the questions of by the students. The idea is that not all questions have obvious answers. So persuading students to engage with, deeper questions for which they can look for answers on their own or with your help, in areas which are other than communication, probably, right? That it's a vast pool of knowledge from which you can get your answers. Encouraging students to do that would be helpful. So an interdisciplinary approach must be incorporated in the syllabi in all departments to encourage media practice that is more inclusive. And this, I mean, the departments of media itself, to make media practice that is inclusive, cooperative, and broader in terms of thinking, exercising, experimenting, and practices. You have to constantly keep linking, media practice with other disciplines, with the rest of the world, with society, with, other things that are important to a person's living life itself, right? This does not mean in any way that you have to move away from the idea of assignments, or move away from grading. When we say open kind of education, it does not mean that there doesn't have to be rigor. Nobody is asking us to bring down the quality of education. In fact, NEP is all about enhancing the quality of education in a manner that it can be useful for the student. So education needs to inculcate a strong personal ethic in the students. So when you are self-learners, you need to be even more disciplined, right? Uh, and when we motivate them towards achieving self-reliance, critical awareness, and confidence in accomplishments, we are not asking them to move away from quality education or from to be able to do things at will, or give them marks although they are not performing. But the parameters for judging those performance has to change and be more adaptive. So let media faculty adopt, let's say, outcome based and project based learning modules, along with light but tight continuous assessment that incentivizes the competencies imbibed through experiential learning and life skills. So emphasis has to be on learning, conceptual, contextual understanding, a very big emphasis on ethics, and of course, human values. So that was about, holistic and multidisciplinary education. The second thing that I'm emphasizing on, of course, is the need of the hour, which is to create the education 4.0 learning environment. So high time media education would become future ready and responsive. So we cannot say that just because we are looking at values, we are looking at connecting media education to society, and we are looking at social good, that we can stay away from a technology which is all pervasive now, right? So we must align journalism and mass communication media teaching with the needs of the networked society and the next generation worlds of immersive virtual reality and augmented reality. If we try to tell our students, no, you have to learn the same way of doing newspaper like I did, print. Yes, they have to, because the editing accuracy, all of that matters. But the method of doing it, the mode of doing it, the model of doing it has changed. You can do it on your laptop, you can do it on your phone. So now there's a lot of teaching which is around mobile journalism. So you have to adapt to the media education field to the present times. And this is also about digital empowerment, ensuring that advanced technology of media serves the cause of transforming higher education. So this technology must be used, as I said earlier in the beginning, before I came into the communication education part, that our media technology should be able to benefit education as a whole, right? So the digital technologies that are available should enhance the way education is delivered also. And as you will agree with me, consequent to COVID-19 pandemic, the need to build an infrastructure, the structure which provides information, knowledge, and the technical conditions for running teaching on multiple platforms and for encouraging a blend of remote and face-to-face learning has become imperative. It is not and the future is also about that. You cannot just have classroom teaching, and you cannot just have face to face teaching or just remote learning. It has to be a combination of both. There has to be lecture mode, and there has to be what are called flipped classrooms. So all of that technology is here to stay. It is good if communication departments would adopt to and adapt to this. The new generation of professionals are looking for what is called personalized learning environments. Many of them want it to be self-paced courses. So those who want it self-paced, give them self-paced. Those who want to do proper full-time classroom learning, we should be able to provide them with that. It should depend on the need of the student. The idea is to make everybody learn, to make education inclusive and for all, right? So self-paced courses, opportunities for interactive and collaborative work. And for all this, a judicious use of technology must be there to cater to the diverse needs of the students. The NEP 2020 incorporates comprehensive recommendations for building of the digital infrastructure to address the fault lines of the Indian digital divide. So NEP recognizes that there is a digital divide and that there needs to be some kind of a way of addressing that. Media departments, I feel, can contribute to this endeavor. And this can be done not only through producing quality digital content, but also by offering learner centered, flexible curricula for their own media education, right? And also for other courses also, right? That strengthen the unique capability of each student. So digital technologies are being used in MOOCs and many other platforms where media has become an important media technology has started playing an important role. So the NEP says vocational education should start from class 6. So therefore the asymmetries of access to digital tools need to be plugged at that stage itself through introduction of technology and media literacy in the curriculum from the school stage. So the next thing I want to talk about is, taking from the NEP again, is to enable inclusion, multilingualism, and a culture of research. So the new paradigm of media education must mirror and reflect the spirit of NEP that considers education as a leveler, education for all inclusive education, and also education in a manner that the people which is student centric, it caters to the demands and needs of the student. And therefore we must enable what are three things: inclusion, multilingualism, and a culture of research. And media educators must designate diversity training. For inclusion, it is important that while that gender equality, for example, or sensitivity to caste, sensitivity to class, the fact that people are different, it should be a cross-cutting theme through all courses of skill acquisition and of theory. Just a small example, that if we are teaching students to write, how to write in a manner which is, let's say, sensitive to differently abled people. So that idea of inclusion, it shouldn't just be a tokenism. It should actually be present in the way we conduct our work, right? So one crucial step in this direction would be that media education for one crucial step towards inclusion would be that media education promotes multilingualism and enhances production capacity of high quality language journalism or regional media. So students to be taught in the language that they are comfortable in is one thing, and the other is it shouldn't be one language media that should be dominating. Why can't media in all languages be of world global standards, right? Why can't it follow quality, be of a quality which is good and which is appreciated by all? So respect for all languages is something that needs to be inculcated. Another thing that needs to be inculcated, and this is very important, people think media education departments are just skill building, places where where journalists are created for the market. It is not that. These are the hubs where a lot of good research which is socially relevant can happen. So most important for media departments and universities is to become what are called intellectual hubs or intellectual spaces. They must be spaces that foster outstanding interdisciplinary research that is socially oriented, culturally rooted, and brings in a plurality of perspectives and representation. Right? A lot of the research that I do on community media follows some of those principles, and the department gains from that research in many other ways. Culture studies is another field where research is carried out in a manner which is contextual and which brings in multiple perspectives. And finally, of course, something, as I said, I'm very passionate about, is that media ethics needs to be a part of all curricula of media education that media education departments follow. And this is not about saying media ethics as one course which lists the do's and don'ts of journalistic profession. That is not just what we are talking about. So before I get into this, I'll just tell you quickly a story. And this story came out in one of my projects that I was doing on media ethics curriculum development for the US Consulate. And we were interacting with the journalists, and those journalists were trying to help us come up with a curriculum which will, which will also prepare young journalists for the media industry. And hoping that the new crop of journalists will be a conscientious lot which will try and follow some ethical principles while while doing their job. So the story is about a reporter who found himself stranded when his car broke down on the national highway, and a child approached him for him begging for food. What did the journalist do is followed the child to the nearby village where she lived and found her living with her sick mother and siblings in abject poor, completely poverty stricken family. And the child's father had committed suicide and died a year earlier. Now this journalist, what did he do? He, of course, his job is to get the story. So he did get the story, but he took a personal interest in the child's life, not just use it to have a story. And he began to cover the story of this child, whom he had just met as happenstance, to portray the depth of rural poverty and plight of farming families in the state of Telangana. So the journalist ended up writing follow-up stories, doing his job on the family, and for several years, and linking it to the existing policies, and connected the family to non-governmental organizations and schemes in the area. Now, what happened is, by doing this, the journalist was, doing the job that a market-oriented journalism organization is supposed to do, but at the same time also fulfilling his duty of doing public good. So what we are trying to say here is that when we mark against injustice as a core principle of journalistic practice, you can bring this case study to your class and then tell your students that it is possible to address injustices even in a consumer driven media industry. So there is room for such kind of stories to be put in the newspaper. Now another editor we talked to spoke at length about his newspaper efforts to address sex tourism and poverty in the minority Muslim community in Hyderabad. So teaching teaching through case studies such as this can speak to media students and tell them how their work could connect them to the efforts made by, not just them, but they can also connect to the work being done by governments to disallow such practices, right? So having a very cynical approach saying that media is all bad and there is no scope to do good journalism is not right. If you bring in good examples into the class, it will give hope to the students that they are not just being produced as money, as people who will bring money to the organization, but they are also capable of doing social good. So a journalism and media curriculum can teach students to focus on the lives of the people and impact both politics and people's lives. So journalists and at the very beginning of when they are being trained, if journalists, media students understand that they hold a power where they can do good, they will follow it when they join the profession also. So I feel that as journalism schools take up a rigorous audit of their own practices, there is a need for all media departments to do an internal audit to see what is their curriculum. Is their curriculum uh, uh, is it fulfilling the aims for which a media education department was set up? Not just to create people with skills, but also with thinking ability. So I propose that when you do that, you consider an alternative to transmission driven, industry conceived, exclusively skills oriented model of journalism education. And while it is useful to remain focused on such practices, building skills, we must introduce an ethics curriculum that reconnects journalism with its democratic and ethical roots. So an ethics program which is not just about giving codes of ethics to students, but whatever they do, when they do reporting, when they do editing, when they do visual media, when they do audio, connecting it all the time with cases which helps them to think in a manner that makes them do ethical journalism is what is the need of the hour. So such a curriculum could reinvigorate journalism programs and encourage more productive connections between the work of educators, scholars, and practitioners. This kind of ethics training is needed even when we are doing research. So I'll end by, I know the time is for you to ask questions, but I'll also end by just, putting some questions in the public domain. I'll start by saying, in this increasingly convergent and challenging world, how do we bring about change in our curriculum to make our students globally aware, locally conscious, and ethically grounded practitioners who will contribute to society? And as you can see, this reflects the spirit of the NEP 2020 itself. Then the question, how do we create commitment to principles of academic excellence and social justice, leading to work that pushes the boundaries of the discipline and is theoretically informed, sensitive, and produces knowledge that can perform transformative roles? So that is a question we need to ask when we build our curriculum. Journalism education is considered to be a little anti-theory. We should not be scared of theories. Theory, when connected with practice, is what creates critical thinking. And finally, how must teachers reinvent themselves in the roles of collaborators, enablers, facilitators for providing a more holistic learning environment in an increasingly networked world, in the hope to mentor students into being intellectually ambitious, socially engaged, willing to question, and to reinvent themselves through their research and practice. I'll stop here. I thank you so much, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, ma'am. The session is open for interaction. Participants may use the raise hand option in the Teams, and please do mention your name and the institution. Yes, Pooja Mishra ma'am can ask question.
Good morning, ma'am. This side Pooja Mishra, and I'm speaking from Lucknow. I'm assistant professor in a Lucknow University affiliated college, that is Modern Girls College of Professional Studies. And ma'am, I was listening to your insight. It is a great insight, and these kind of discussion really help one, to stay in touch with those ascents. So, ma'am, you really talked well about the theory and the concepts that one need not to afraid of it. They need to understand. But what challenge I feel personally, and I am looking for your guidance and insight into it, is it is very difficult for the young students to make them understand how to apply those subjective and theoretical concepts into real life, and specifically in the field of media when they cannot see it in the field in the industry. So, how we need to fill this particular gap?
Very this is a wonderful question, Pooja. Thank you. Yeah, you are in fact voicing a concern that most of us have. One in terms of theory, the other in terms of ethics. So, as far as theory is concerned, we need to deconstruct theory for our students in a manner. We must make them realize that theory is not something out there, which we cannot understand, and it is big words and it is philosophy. It doesn't apply to the real world. Theory, where does theory come from? Theory comes from the real world.
Yes.
It is yeah, It's it's a way of telling people how things happen in real life. So the best theory is the one which is closest to the reality. So if we are able to relate theory to the way journalism is practiced, and help that become a way of thinking about journalism, that it can be done in another way also, or it can be done differently, or there are different ways in which some, let's say, a story can be covered, or so on. It will help, and we have to make a beginning somewhere slowly. Just because it is not being done doesn't mean it cannot be done. And there are people who derive a lot of let's say guidance from the theory that they studied, a lot of understanding of the society from the theory that they study, right? And then reflect it in the reports that they are writing. This is one. But you are absolutely right in saying, does industry allow that? Is there time when there is deadline on your head, and when your owners are demanding you to give a breaking news? Yes, there are problems. And that is where our education, our journalism education comes in. If we were only supposed to create people who would go and give us a report without even using their mind, go there mechanically, write a report, come and put it on on television, or give it to the news editor, that's not the kind of journalist we want to create from university departments. University is about thinking. University is where people would first ethically think whether what they're doing is right or not, rather than, yes, it could be a career limiting step. You will see other people getting advantage by selling their souls. But if even a few students are there who would think about the ethical ramifications of what they are doing before they go and present a story on in the media that they are working in, you have achieved your purpose of being a media educator. So it is tough, and tough things, as I said, are what challenges are what help us bring about a change. So yes, there are people who do good journalism, and why can't we be one of those, right? So ethical journalism is not something that has become non-existent. It is there, and there are ways of doing ethical journalism. You have to find a way to do it. You have to be smart, right? To be able to give news and at the same time also be able to do good. Yeah, I hope that somehow answers the question that you have asked. It's not
Absolutely, ma'am.
easy. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions?
Looks like everybody agrees with me.
Yes.
All right. Dinesh has a question.
No, ma'am. The thing is like we can have a different session for having an individual interaction when we are
Yes, sure.
framing out our curriculum. Surely, I will
Sure,
be in
sure.
connecting with you.
It will be my pleasure. But
Thank
I
you,
think
ma'am.
one thing I would like to really encourage everybody to do is to have an audit of sorts. Is it okay to talk 2 minutes about that?
Sure, ma'am.
If all of us could go back to our departments and have what is called an academic audit, where we do a kind of a needs based assessment about what teachers think about the curriculum, what students think about the curriculum, your alumni, what do they think about the curriculum. We did an exercise like that when in my department, and this with the help of very senior faculty members, we put the whole concept together of how an academic audit could be done. We invited 3 people from outside the department to give their suggestions. They interacted with faculty, with students, with alumni, with media people, in order to understand the media's point of view of what they need from journalism departments. And then we reworked our curricula in the light also of the new technological changes that are happening. And we have moved from teaching, of course, the as I said, the primary objectives remain the same, but we have moved, for example, to teaching more digital kind of media, to more convergence, kind of approach in our teaching. So that was one thing. Then, that students should be given a basket of courses where a student who's interested in theory and research can also pick a skills course. A student who is interested in skills can also pick a theory course in order to, have, and then there should be a lot of electives where they can go to other departments and studied. I understand this is very similar again to what has been proposed as the credit based system that we all are following. So good to have a look at what we are doing right now and where we need to go.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, if I am allowed, can I put some my insight into this particular same discussion? Am I allowed?
Sure. I mean,
Sure.
Dinesh has
Yes,
to tell
sure,
you.
ma'am. Sure.
Actually, ma'am, you have really raised a great point over here, and I want to share my personal experience on this particular aspect. Ma'am, I am doing from a very long time research independently by myself, where I am trying to compare the different syllabus of the different universities and the colleges we are having all over the India. And the insight which I got over here is, ma'am, we have a huge gap between the syllabus and the content which we are teaching in different corners of the country. Specifically, the private universities and the government universities, where I don't know why the standardization of the content is not there, and still people think that only memorizing and putting journalism as the easiest option is the best way to go for it. And you said absolutely correct that from video editing to the writing skills and speaking skills are very important point, which is not really being practiced in the creative labs which need to do. And I have one of my students over here, she's from medical field, she prepared for NEET, she was not able to crack it, then she entered into journalism. So I tried to make her understand that how her knowledge of science and environment and
Yes.
climate change can add up and create a real niche of being a environmental journalist and the field of media in the environment and climate change. So I don't
Absolutely.
know
Yeah.
what is the insight, but when you talk, so I prefer to share this thing over here.
Very interesting. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Journalism is one discipline where students come from different backgrounds. You don't necessarily have to have done your undergrad in journalism in order to join journalism. So they come from various backgrounds. We get lawyers, we get engineers, we get, like you have said, a medical student, all kinds of students. So some amount of basics and standardized curriculum may be important, and we need to know the core competencies that must be created within the curriculum. But I must say one small thing, that it also depends on the teacher who is delivering the curriculum. In our department, and I'm very proud and happy to say that some aspects of the curriculum are fixed, of course, because they need to be done. But a lot of freedom is given to the teacher who is teaching to decide on what they would like to be a part of that course that they are teaching, apart
Def-
from those basics that are there. So which brings in the experience and the expertise of the teacher also into the curriculum. So if I am teaching let's say history of media, I would teach it, let us say, in a manner which is received history, right? And then try to also bring in the history of women journalists in India and so on. But bringing in history of women journalism is women journalists is not a mandatory thing in history. Whereas there is another person who is teaching history, they would teach it more from a theoretical point of view of historiography of history, which is alternative history, as they say, yeah, revisionist kind of history that is happening in that they would like to focus on. Not saying that they will not talk about the received history, they will, but they'll critique it by also bringing in revisionist versions of history. So it's very interesting if we have a mix of standardized and flexible curriculum in the country, where the expertise and of the faculty also gets reflected in the curriculum. So that will be very interesting also.
Sure, ma'am. It's a great
Yes.
insight. I'll try to merge this thing.
Sure. No, you can look
Yes.
at curriculum from this point of view also in your research.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And Dr. Kanchan, ma'am,
Yes.
I have to add on some more thing is like while we are just focusing on framing out a curriculum based on industrial requirements and all, we will be inviting the industrialists to have a discussion regarding framing out a curriculum and all. But at the same time, we have to also discuss the same industrial has to come forward to bring out some research aspects, which will
Absolutely.
help the students to undergo with the experimental study.
Certainly. Certainly. Yes.
Yes,
In
like
fact,
what your university you people is doing with the Facebook and the social medias and its
yes.
importance and all. Likewise,
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. In fact, the industry can benefit a lot if they collaborate with you to do research on their own, on the work that they are doing. So,
yes,
asking universities to do the research would be a very, very interesting way of collaborating with the industry. Yes.
yes, yes,
So,
yes.
absolutely.
That will be
So,
well and good.
that will be a wonderful kind of a university industry interaction. Absolutely.
Yes,
Wonderful idea.
I mean, I would like to add on, like, Dr. Shemin, a freelance academic. I think it's also good to add on if the industry could use the academia to, do impact assessments of their own projects, which would really help,
Absolutely.
because impact assessment, and I mean, certainly you mentioned something about that, that
Yes, yes.
kids thing, which is kind of, so I think it's essentially when the industry and the academia come together, you can frame up strategies, and that would, it's like mutually complementary factor, like, right, exactly.
Absolutely. No, no, you're very right. If industry is there, whatever research you are doing, what social impact it has, or how is it benefiting the public, is a very important aspect to go into. Another very important point you have raised. So that's very interesting. Another important thing that I had focused on, and I hope it came out in the presentation, was that you know not just media education departments, but media education needs to be open to other departments also, for other department students to come and take our courses also. And
mm,
if media
yes,
education could be introduced as especially the what is now being called media literacy,
it,
on the effects and impact, as you have said, of digital world or digital media on people, right? So that is also very, very interesting aspect.
and
So
yes.
consumption of digital media is and the impact it has on people's lives is a very interesting aspect that can be talked about in research as well as in teaching.
And even, ma'am, while we are just teaching out the students, for example, discussing about media literacy. So mainly this has to come from school education. So if it is possible, our post-graduation students learning from us, and if they are going for giving out a training sessions to the school students to know and understand about the media literacy, and coming back and getting out credits or score for that particular assigned work, it will be more benefit.
Oh, very nice. That is exactly the kind of thing I was talking about. That
Yes,
yes, the experiential learning that they will get, by
yes,
doing project-based work, which will
yes,
they will learn on their own instead of learning in a class. By first hand, they will be learning this. And also, when you're talking about media literacy these days, so much of training is needed about disinformation, fake news, aspects related to what is now being called infodemic, right? I'm sure many of your students will be interested in how pictures are doctored, right?
mm,
Misrepresentation through pictures. So the
pictures.
picture is saying something different from what is actually the fact. I mean, there can be a whole, series of, there can be a whole lecture on how photos are manipulated to present things which are not factual, right? So,
Mm.
and how, what are the ethical issues related to photojournalism? That's a different topic altogether. Again, if you were to ask your students to do a project on that, they will come up with very interesting insights. Wonderful idea.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
absolutely.
So, any other
All right.
questions from audience side?
I hope it was not too theoretical, Pooja.
It is more interactive
Yeah.
and more informative too.
Not at all,
Yes.
ma'am. I really got a lot of insights over here.
Okay. So I tried to connect the actual curriculum with, this concept of by Paulo Freire, who says we should democratize education. Basically, we should try to make students a part of the learning process, which is what Dinesh just now mentioned. Also,
Yes.
thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. I now invite Dr. Dinesh Babu, the head of the Department of Visual Media and Communication, to thank the guest.
Yes, I have to informally just thank our guest initially because it is a good opportunity to meet her as soon because of this blended learning and kind of webinar and all. So thank you, ma'am, Dr. Kanchan, Malik. It was an indeed and wonderful session that insights the importance of focusing on the changing paradigms in media and communication research. So it will be more truthful for us to incorporate these all inputs towards our curriculum designs. Thank you so much on behalf of Amrita School of Arts and Science, Amrita Vishwavidyapeetham University, on behalf of our faculty members. I am thanking you, and we are just moving forward and looking forward to work with you in future.
Sure.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dinesh, and thank you to Amrita Vishwavidyapeetham, right? I hope I
Yes,
got
ma'am.
the name right, for inviting me. It was such a pleasure. If you want, I'll share my presentation with you. I'll send it to Dinesh. You can share it with all the participants.
Sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am.
All right.
We are also doing like today in the evening, we are going to give out the inputs which is taken from this 3-day as a souvenir. So we will be sending to all the participants with the e-certificate. We will send the e-souvenir also. And the guest will also get one hot copy of the souvenir.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank
Such
you
a
so much.
pleasure to interact with all of you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.